This week, we are joined by Aubrieta Hope as we discuss the art of solo traveling. You are listening to the LAKESCAPE Photography Podcast. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the LAKESCAPE Photography Podcast. We are on episode 12, and I am excited to be bringing you guys this discussion. I am your host, Nicholas Albert, and this week I was joined by my good friend and fellow photographer, Aubrieta Hope. A landscape photographer and an adventurous spirit, we had an incredible discussion around traveling solo, preparing for getting out into the wilderness alone, and some of the wins and losses of her experiences out in the wilderness. A workshop leader, professional photographer, and incredibly kind-hearted individual, Aubrieta shares her experiences over 3 decades of landscape photography and solo travel. From Michigan's Upper Peninsula to the incredible North American Southwest, from chasing night skies, the northern lights, and landscapes in the areas far and wide. Aubrieta recounts the moments that made her who she is today. From planning and preparedness, overcoming fear, to simply planning your first trip, this episode is packed with wonderful information from an incredible individual who has taken life by the reins and chosen to experience all it has to offer. As always, the images discussed in this episode are linked in the show notes below so that you can check them out as we go. I encourage you guys to visit her website, social links, give her a follow, and join her on her journey right here in the Great Lakes and beyond. Without any further delay, let's jump into this week's discussion with Aubrieta Hope. Aubrieta, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Nick. Thanks for including me. I'm just really enjoying your podcast. I love the people you've had on. It's an honor to be included and invited, especially on this topic that I have such an attachment to. It's a big part of what I enjoy doing, and so I'm excited to talk about that topic in particular. So I'm a landscape photographer. I love the night skies. I'm definitely more of a sunset to night sky starry kind of shooter. I'm not a sunrise shooter at all. I have a few of those shots, sometimes because I stayed up all night and I kept on shooting it, so I was in time for the sunrise. But yeah, I have to admit, I'm more of a later kind of time of day photographer. And I shoot Nikon, and I've gotten into the mirrorless, and I'm really enjoying all the advantages of that. And so yeah, I like to shoot in Michigan. I love the UP. I'm from Illinois. I don't honestly shoot in Illinois that much anymore, to be honest with you. When I'm in Illinois, I'm usually working on photos and that I shot in Michigan. And I also love to go to the Southwest as well.
Yeah, I've noticed that after your October trip, you always end up in the Southwest for a few months.
Yes, I love it. I love the area of Big Bend National Park. I love Texas. I love the Texas coast and the hill country. Those are the places I like that are, to me, the most scenic with the most wilderness. And that's why I like the UP too, because I love the wilderness.
Yeah, both excellent places to experience the wilderness. And I always love seeing your posts when you go to the Southwest or when you're coming back from a late night trip in the Upper Peninsula chasing the northern lights. You always seem to find the wildest adventures out there. And it reminds me of last May when we both happened to be in the same place chasing the northern lights in northern Wisconsin. And here I am going down this crazy back road, and I'm texting Aubrieta like, hey, I'm going to this point. And like it was decently off-roady to like get to some of these places. And
oh yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah, I mean, and you were going everywhere up there.
Well, I was just following your ideas. I had no idea. You remember that night, obviously, and it just blew up while we're on the highway. I don't know. You were further north, I think, of me a bit. I got off at Spooner, it turned out. I didn't know where I was. I just saw the lights through my front windshield and I thought, I got to pull over. So, yeah. And from then on, I didn't even know anything. And so you gave me some ideas. Trying to think of that one river you told me about. That was probably the best place I landed up. I forget the name of that river. Start with a T, I think. Anyway, I had no idea. I was driving around and it was just such an amazing night, just shooting all night. Really. That was historic.
Yeah,
May 10th. Yeah.
yeah, that was an incredible, incredible night. I got off work and I just jumped in the truck and started going. I was a man on a mission. My wife was like, what are you planning on doing when you get there? I was like, I'm just going to buy some Red Bulls and I'm going to stay up all night. And I remember coming through, like, I was on my way home, the sun was coming up and I was like passing through the Wisconsin dells and the sunlight, perfect soft light. I was just sitting there thinking to myself, like, I still have 4 hours until I'm home. What did I do? Like,
I can't believe you did that. When you said you were back home, I just couldn't even believe that you pulled that off. I mean, that's a lot of driving.
it was worth it though. I mean, I think both of us came away with some great shots. That one that you have of the river mouth with the big green pillar in the background, that was cool. I'll have to link it in the show notes so everybody can check it out.
Oh yeah, that was really great. That's a spot that you told me about, and I would have never known. I mean, I was just it was I had no idea. I stopped at the gas station in Illinois near where I live to get a map. I got like a map. I didn't even have a map of Minnesota. And of course, I never made it to Minnesota, but I got some kind of I don't know, atlas or something. And of course, I only made it to northern Wisconsin. Really, you didn't make it to Minnesota either, did you? I mean, we had these ideas that we were going to end up at Split Rock or something.
Yeah, we were both trying to get to Split Rock,
Not
and
not possible.
no, I mean, after we talked about the area that both of us ended up at, I had actually left that spot and I went a little further north. I think it's called Maze Ledges is where I ended up. And then I started driving again, and I know I was briefly in Minnesota at some point. Um, but I was just trying to get out of the storm that was blowing through up there at the time. So, but either way, an awesome experience, and it really lends itself to that piece of, the art of being solo, but also, working together to achieve your goals. And, a lot of what you do is those late night solo adventures to chase the northern lights. Um, I remember that shot. I think it was 2023, maybe it was 2022, where you had Midnight the van under the northern lights.
Oh, and the Porkies. That was February of 2023. Yeah. Yeah. It was like this incredible event. Again, it was just take off, drive like crazy, see the lights through the front windshield, and hurry up and get to the lakeshore and then just shoot all night. Just a blessing.
And it's, one of those beautiful things that, as you continue your adventure in photography, I feel like these opportunities present themselves, and being prepared to just grab your gear and capitalize on it is just monumental. And it's really something that I think drives all of us as photographers. Is we kind of have that solo travel mindset of the freedom and benefits of going alone. You're free to be creative. You're free to change your plans on a whim if needed. You really get that flexibility, that deeper creative focus, and that personal growth from it. What inspired you to start solo traveling and just getting out there?
Well, I was already going on independent trips. I would take like 5 or 6 days every summer, and I would go stay at a B&B back when there was really regular B&Bs in northern Wisconsin or the UP or Michigan or whatever. And so I was already taking occasional solo trips like once a year. And so that idea appealed to me. But then when I started getting involved in photography, then I started getting involved in actual camping, tent camping, and solo travel, and doing a lot more solo travel. And so I was talking about it with our mutual friend Neil Weaver the other day, and about this question, like, why did you get involved in solo photography? It was really because at first I didn't have any friends. I didn't know any other photographers. For years I did not know any other photographers, and I wanted to go shoot, and so I was who I had to shoot with. And then I was very fortunate to meet other photographers while I was out there. That's one of the advantages of running around by yourself. You meet other photographers doing the same thing, and I learned so much, and I still do. I really learn a lot when I'm with other photographers, and I rely on that because I'm big on show me how to do it. I ask questions, but then I find that when I'm with other people, I learn a lot. I learn more probably with other people than on my own. I'm not that good at self-taught anything. I kind of have to be shown. But once I understand something, I am more productive by myself. So that's pretty mean. Like, you can be my friend while you're helping me and then I run off. But all my friends are also very independent. And so even when I do shoot with my friends, a lot of times we just wander around. I mean, we're not necessarily all standing in the same spot, and maybe take off and go this way or that way. But I am better if I'm by myself because I'm not distracted. And of course, I can be more flexible. And like we were saying earlier, I don't have to share. I'm actually, when I'm shooting, I'm really slow. Like, it takes me a long time to figure out my shot. Half the time, if I'm with Neil Weaver or my friend Craig Sturkin, we shoot together from time to time. They are so good. They are so fast. And they will be like right where I finally figured out to go. They're not trying to be in my way, but they're like everywhere. They're like fast, they're like efficient, and I'm really slow. And I finally get it all figured out, set up, and it's like, oh, there's somebody standing there. So I'm actually at my pace. I work slowly. That's just my head, and I'm better by myself because I kind of need room to range. I need the kind. I know, sounds kind of selfish, but like, I don't. It's hard to share, sometimes when it comes to this wide angle shooting, like we were saying earlier. It's not easy, because it's like, and of course, you don't want to get in anybody's way and bother anybody. I'm not waving at them, get out of here, But yeah, I do find that it's just I'm more prolific. I'm more prolific by myself. So, but it's a balance. I mean, really, I wouldn't know half as much as I know if it wasn't for my friends that I've met that are so inspiring. And also, even with the workshops, photo workshops that Neil and I do, I've met so many other photographers doing those workshops. And Neil and I both have said we've learned so much from the people that have attended our workshops, whether it's about gear or equipment or locations. And, of course, talking to other photographers is a great way to know about locations if they like you. They'll tell them to you, or it's techniques. Oh my gosh, So it isn't just being by myself, but that's kind of where I'm more productive ultimately.
Yeah. I mean, it's like you said, it gives you time to practice different approaches, different techniques. You can experiment, and you don't have that commitment of that social piece where, you're interacting with each other and, trying to maintain conversation and not just, group of people walking through the woods, not speaking to each other. That'd be strange.
Oh yeah, and we're all such good friends that of course it's chit chat, and some people can do a whole bunch of stuff at once, even chew gum and walk and all that stuff. But I'm one of these people that if I start talking them, I go to my left brain and my right brain just kind of goes to sleep, and I'm not in the zone anymore. Now, other people can chit chat and shoot. I mean, the portrait photographers are obviously an example of that. They're keeping it going and they're shooting and they're spinning the dials and they're fine. Like, they're multitasking. But for me, if I'm not talking, it's better because my brain has all the real estate it needs to actually get the shot.
No, that's totally relatable. And realistically, I'm the same way with it. When I'm out there by myself, I can focus on what I'm doing. I find that shooting with people is extremely beneficial, like you said, and I always enjoy the company, whoever I'm with. I'm always having a great time, and it's nice to share those experiences with your friends and other photographers. But I find that a lot of my best shots are when I go somewhere, I can operate at my own pace. I can explore the area as needed and move around, take a step left, maybe climb up a bluff and, whatever the case might be, it really helps to just change your approach to photography and creativity because you're not just kind of balancing all these different things. You can just focus on one thing. One of the things that I think kind of deters people from maybe going out and doing these sorts of things alone or doing photography, hiking, any real creative outdoor pursuit, you know, I feel like there's kind of some misconceptions about it. You know, is there a danger piece to a degree? Is there, a preparation piece? Definitely. But what are some of the biggest misconceptions you think are out there about traveling solo?
Well, I think as a female, and I'm older, now, but when I was younger, same thing. Of course, times were different then, but I think the two biggest assumptions people have are that it's lonely and that it's dangerous. They assume that if you took a trip by yourself, that you would be lonely, that there wouldn't be anybody to talk to, that you'd feel isolated, bored, whatever. And they assume that you're just taking your life in your hands. Like, do you have 10 guns? Do you have a dog? Do you have, I don't know, electric fence around, do you have, I mean, just those two, I would say, I consider them misconceptions. They're usually held by people that haven't traveled alone. They've just seen things on TV, and of course stuff can happen. I mean, it's always possible that there can be a bad experience. It's always possible, that a person could feel lonely or wish that they could share it with another person. But I have found that in general, on the lonely point, that if I travel alone, I meet a lot more people. Like, I've gone on trips where Neil and Craig and we've all traveled in a pack, the three of us all strung out on the road for 2-3 days and, hanging out. And it's very rare to meet anybody when you're with a group. You're laughing, you're talking, you're not talking to other people, you're talking to each other. So when I'm alone, I meet so many more people than I would if I was with a friend or, a group of some sort. And it's amazing to me the people I've met. Like, when I was at Big Bend National Park this past winter, I met up with a family I met last Christmas down there, and we've been in touch the whole year. We're like, hey, when you guys coming back? And we weren't camping next to each other like last year, which was just random when we met. But we were camping at the park, and we made plans. We got together like 3 times in a week. These people, they live in Austin, and we just had a blast. I mean, they enjoy photography as well, as it happens. But I mean, just really interesting conversations. So sometimes I meet people and see them again, and sometimes it's even random. Like, I remember one time at Padre Island National Seashore at Corpus Christi area, I was just walking across to my campsite at this primitive campground in the national park, and somebody says Aubrieta. I'm like, wait a minute, what? Who could that even be? I am 1,250 miles from my home. And it was these people I had seen the prior March, but we all kind of go at the same time. So that's why that happened. And that's happened. That's happened in the Porkies. These people that always rent the same spot, and I always rent the same spot. We see each other year to year. Hey, so the first time it happens, you're like, wait, how do you know my name? Oh yeah, So it's actually not. I don't personally feel that it's a lonely thing, and I'm not even outgoing. I'm not outgoing. Like, I'm not hi everybody. It's just the nature of just being out and about, meeting like-minded people, So I would say that a lonely thing is definitely overstated. Um, and I mean, of course, I'm kind of more on the introvert end. So maybe it would take me a little longer to get lonely. Like if somebody was really an extrovert, then that might be hard. Like if you really just had to be with people every second, then that might not be a good fit. But I'm sort of in the middle on that. So the lonely thing is not, I have not found that to be an issue, honestly, no matter how long. I mean, I was 2.5 months in the Southwest, and I had no problem. Actually, you meet people, and you're hanging out, and you're kind of like, okay, I gotta go shoot now. You're extricating yourself, and I mean, national parks in particular, I find national park campgrounds are very friendly. I find them to be more friendly than state park campgrounds, probably because you have just a different clientele. Like it's not large family groups. It's more like couples traveling or solo travelers. But I don't know. I didn't know that would happen. It's just how it works out anyway for me over the past 30 years that I've been solo traveling. So it's pretty long, so far so good. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's how you and I met
Yeah.
back
Oh yeah.
in 2022 with
Yeah.
my
And
wife.
Katie.
Yeah, my wife Katie and I we came up to the Overlook I think it was June or July, and I just went up there because same reason you were there. The storm was clearing, and I told Katie, I was like, hey, maybe there's going to be a rainbow. Maybe there'll be some cool light on the clouds. Let's just go up and check it out. And you were the only one there. And I was
That's
like,
great.
hey, you're Aubrieta. And now
That was
here we
great.
are, 3 years
Yeah.
later.
I know. It's so cool how people meet, how people run into each other and then they just connect, and really that actually brings me to, we were talking about the danger thing. And I've told this story before, but, honestly, I think there are dangers, but as far as like, the crazed killer in the woods or whatever, like that's just not something that I have found to be that common. And I was joking around about this with Neil the other day. Like really the only time I was wondering was one time when I was at Quamanon Falls, Upper Falls parking lot, and I was there for sunrise. So it was pitch dark out, and there was this guy in a minivan rummaging around. I'm like, oh man. And I was early at this. You may know this story already. I've told it so many times. But I was early at this, so I was jumpy. I was like, oh, I don't know if I should be here in the dark. Who's that guy? What's he doing? I'm not getting out of the car. I'm keeping it locked. I'm going to stay here, see what he does. And so I'm watching, and then I see that he pulls out a tripod. I'm like, oh, it's fine. I mean, first of all, he had this huge camera backpack and a tripod. I'm like, there's no way he can carry the axe at the same time. Like, it's just so much gear, So I was like, all right, it's fine. So I saw this guy. He gets all his stuff out and he goes down the trail, and I just trotted out after him. And that was the beginning of me trying to keep up with Neil Weaver, because it was Neil. And of course I couldn't catch him. I still can't catch him. And, and I wasn't scared of him actually after I realized that he had a tripod. And we just ended up talking. And, of course, that was a dozen years ago, and now we've been doing workshops for 7 years, and it was purely a chance, random meeting. And I joke, and I was saying this to our group the other workshop, that it's amazing to me that this whole enterprise rests on whether or not I was going to get up for the sunrise, because sunrise is so brutally hard for me. And I got up for the sunrise, and therefore I met Neil Weaver. I mean, we don't live, as you know, Neil and I don't live anywhere near each other. There's no other way we would have met. If I'd have slept through the sunrise, we would never have met, and we would never have the workshops, So that's one plug for sunrises. You might make new friends. But yeah, so I haven't found in 30 years of sleeping behind a zipper in a tent by myself with no dog, gun, or man, to protect me. I have not found that, I'm not saying that bad things can't happen, but I think it's overrated. I think the concern, at least in my experience anyway.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I've been going out hiking, camping, doing photography my whole life. And I think there may have been one or two instances where I had come across a situation that may have been questionable, but it's typically, at a campground where somebody maybe had too much to drink, or, there's other factors. When you're out there on the trail and just exploring, taking it all in, I've found that 9 people out of 10 will be very friendly and want to talk, and they'll say hi, and they ask what you're doing, where you're going, where you've been. And like you said, you make great friends doing that. I've met so many people in the Porcupine Mountains, all around the Upper Peninsula, Minnesota, even in Wisconsin, and right here in Illinois. I mean, I've met photographers from all over the world, and they're all great people. We all have that common interest and that similar passion of, we just want to be in the outdoors and experience it. And I think, those two misconceptions that you noted there, they're really the big ones that people typically think of. It's not lonely, and it's not nearly as dangerous as people are, some people may be led to believe. I mean, yeah, once in a while you'll have a random encounter with an animal, but, for the most part, I mean, I've seen a few bears, I've seen moose, I've seen all kinds of different things. They will always run away. They want nothing to do with you. So, but I think a big thing that may be a hurdle for some people as well is that planning and preparation, that researching locations and, weather considerations, what gear to bring. Do I need a permit to be here? What are the regulations? When you are looking at locations that you want to go to, how are you choosing locations and planning logistics for getting there and making sure you're adhering to all the different regulations of an area?
Well, I have favorite places at this point. I get attached to places. I get attached to places at certain times of year. I mean, and then I have kind of a wish list too, because you see things online and you start to become aware of different photo opportunities. Um, but I feel like it's just my heart leading me with these things, and a lot, honestly, when it comes to fears about being out there by yourself or hitting the road by yourself or camping by yourself, a lot of that gets overcome by love, the love of the craft, the love of the surroundings, just that draw. I mean, May 10th, when you took off from your house, I mean, if there wasn't that incredible data showing up on the aurora, you probably would have just had a nice dinner with your family. You wouldn't have done that. You wouldn't have been up all night, all strung out, exhausted, putting all those miles on your car. I mean, that's really, I feel like that's what it's about, is just that idea that, maybe you can get that shot. Maybe you can experience something that you've been wanting to experience. And that's what drives us. That's what sends us, that's why people leave perfectly good houses to sleep in tents, because the crashing waves on Lake Superior, or the chance of a starry night, or maybe it'll be that sunrise that we've been waiting for, or that sunset, and that, I feel like that overcomes a lot. So I think if it wasn't for that, maybe people wouldn't push through their fears, if they didn't have something lifting them that way, But I would say the first thing I always do is I make reservations. And I know there's people and I meet them when I'm traveling in the winter too, that just go by the seat of their pants. They got somewhere, they just find a place to stay or whatever. I don't do that. I make reservations. I make those 6 months in advance, if that's possible, 5 months if it's that's the schedule that the state or the national park requires. And I do it, in the places I want to be. So I'm kind of picky about that. I'm kind of picky about where I want to put my tent. I don't want it to be in a pond. I don't, I don't want it to be on the rocks. I scout things out. So I make sure that I have the lodging figured out. I don't just take off. I mean, obviously, May 10th, I just took off. I didn't have anything figured out. I didn't even know where the nearest motel was. And that was obviously out of character. But again, that was just meant to be one night. You know, it wasn't like I was traveling across country for a month or a week or something. So, first, yeah. And then I make sure that I have a lot of that stuff. You two probably have pre-packed. Like I have stuffed tubs and things are just in tubs. Time to go, pick up the tub and go, you know, and just kind of a checklist in my head. And I make sure I have paper maps. Always have paper maps. I always have a gazetteer, you know, something that shows detail about counties and areas. So I'm not relying on GPS. And yeah, and then I go by what I remember from before, you know, about where are good places to go. And so I suppose that's the planning. Some people, I do rely somewhat on apps, but I'm not real savvy on all the kinds of apps. You know, I just have certain things I use. But I mean, it's not, it probably looks really impulsive, but it's not. Like there is a plan, you know. It's yeah. So that helps, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, having that plan in place and having your gear organized, that's something I do as well, is all my stuff is in little organization totes. And depending on what I'm planning to go do, I'll grab whatever tote I need. If I'm going to be backpacking and I know I'm going to need my backpacking tent and everything that goes with it, well, I grab that tote and I throw it in the back of the car and I hit the road. Or if I'm staying at a campground, well, you know, things are going to be, the needs are going to be different. So maybe you're bringing a bigger tent and, you know, a full cast iron pan or what have you to actually be able to cook a meal. We all know after a hike, you're going to be hungry. So, you know, it's great that you shared that piece because I think that is something that's learned over time in a lot of instances where I know when I first started traveling solo in my teens, I would just throw everything in the back seat and be like, well, I hope I have everything. If not, well, I guess I didn't need it that bad.
Well, that's a good point. There's stuff that I take with me that I learned about the hard way. You know, I learned about rain gear the hard way. I'll be okay with this. You know, windbreaker that I sprayed with, you know, some waterproofing material. No, you won't actually, you know. So, I mean, everything I've got, I'm thankful, very thankful for. Some of it is because I met people that told me about that gear, and I'm thankful for that. Others, it's just because I went on a trip and I should have had it, and I didn't. I think the trial and error method is pretty convincing, actually.
It certainly is. And it teaches you things that, you know, you like my dad always used to say, when you're out in the wilderness, you're going to learn and you're going to learn fast. And that same thing happened to me a few times. Actually, this past June, I went to Sierra Trading Post and I bought this jacket that said it was windproof, waterproof, all these things. And I was like, hey, I think it was like $30. And I was like, hey, for $30, you know, yeah, I'm all over that. Well, I'm standing there on the Superior shoreline and here's this rain just pounding. And I'm like, hey, I've got this coat in my backpack. I'm going to throw it on. Immediately wets out, soaks through. And I was just like, this thing is not waterproof at all. And it was one of those teaching moments of test your gear before you go just to make sure. And it like you said, you learn these things.
Oh, yeah. I remember one time showing up with a brand new tent. I was at Padre Island National Seashore. And it was blowing a gale. And I'm like reading the instructions as darkness is falling. And I mean, this isn't going to happen. Like first of all, I couldn't put this thing up even if I knew how, because the wind was just knocking me and everything over. And these people just came over and rescued me because I'm like, that was so lame. You hadn't even taken the price tag off. You know what I mean? And you think you're going to pitch it 1,250 miles from home in the semi-darkness, you know? So yeah, test out the gear.
Yeah. That's, I can't tell you how many times I've had similar experiences where I am so confident in my outdoor experience that I'm like, it's going to be fine. And then you get out there and you're like, this is in fact not fine.
Oh my
So,
gosh. Yes.
And
it's always bring duct tape.
Yes, duct tape, something to seal tears in things. I've had it before. It was
tenacious tape. That's good stuff.
Oh yeah. That I want to say it was 2013 or 2014. A couple of friends and we went camping in the driftless region of southern Wisconsin southwestern Wisconsin. And it was like late April, and we were like, yeah, this is fine. This is great. Well, there was rain forecast to be coming in, and my buddy, he had brought one of those tripod stoves with him to put over the campfire. And it had these sharp little feet to dig into the dirt around the fire pit. Well, it caught the side of my tent, and it ripped like a 2-foot hole in the side of my tent. And we were both sitting there. I was like, well, you have tape, right? And he's like, no, I don't have tape. And there's rain coming. So here we are piling into the truck. We're driving to the nearest town to get tape, and the side of my tent's all duct tape shut. Woke up the next morning, my air mattress is floating in my tent, and I'm just like, this is terrible. This is not what I wanted. But, you learn on the fly.
Oh my gosh. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny later, but at the time it's desperate.
Yeah.
It's desperate. I remember one time I left the UP. I had been camping at Munising, and I was at Outer Lake, and the people there said, oh, you don't want to camp here. It's going to be really cold. I'm like, I'll be fine. I wake up and a gallon of water is frozen next to me. That's how cold it was. So I leave the UP in a blinding snowstorm. I'm like, all right, I'm going to go to Platte River. I'm going to go to Sleeping Bear Dunes. It'll be better. I get there and it's just hammering rain. And I stop at a hotel and I ask, and it was something like $60. And I'm like, oh, too much money. And I keep on going. And I remember telling myself, have you lost your mind? I mean, it's just a driving rain, like setting up your tent in a driving rain. It's just, it's basically a disaster, So I get to Platte River. I'm like trying to set my tent. It's really cold. And it had, my tent was a mountaineering tent, but it had some kind of flaw, and the poles started breaking. And I just had I had what I call my apple tantrum, because I went in my car and I had a couple bags of apples, and I was throwing the bags of apples, and I was yelling, I was just screaming and throwing these bags of apples. And then these people came out of the inky darkness with their hand held forward, like, do you want some duct tape? Like, oh my gosh, they heard me. They heard me. Oh my gosh, I was so embarrassed. I didn't think anybody was there. You couldn't see a thing. And so I was like, well, that's what you have to do. You have to have duct tape so you don't wreck all your apples.
It's one of those things where, yes, like Katie and I, I want to say it was 2022 when we were camping. It was the October trip, and we were camping at Union Bay, and she had met me up there. So she drove her car up. And for whatever reason, when we were loading everything into the cars, getting ready to leave, her car battery died. And same thing. I was sitting there. I was like, I don't have jumper cables. It's pouring rain. I was like, we've got a kid with us. At the time, Wesley was my son, my oldest son. He was a little over a year old. And I'm like, we've got a baby. It's raining. It's 40 degrees. This is terrible. And thankfully, the neighbors across the campground, they had one of those little mini jumper packs, and they put it on her car and fires right up. And now I carry one every time I go camping.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you just never know. And that's part of that planning and preparation is, talk to other people that have done it, that have been out there, that have had these experiences, because just in the last 10 minutes, we've covered the big ones, a little jumper pack for your car so you don't get stranded. Bring duct tape, bring extra batteries for your flashlight, bring extra chargers, bring all the little things that you might just say, that's situational. I've learned at least it's probably not situational. It's probably needed.
Oh yeah, and the other thing is too, I've learned is that the car has to be in tip-top shape. Now my car is not new. It's a long ways from new, but I mean, it's got new tires. It's got a new battery. Like, I'm not messing around. Like, when you're in the UP, it's like you're on Gilligan's Island. Like, if something happens, who is going to help you? Where is the nearest place to get a new battery? It could be 2 hours away. And there's no place to rent a car. So I tend to go overboard. Like my mechanics, like, oh, you got another 5,000 on these tires. I'm like, no, we're getting new tires. I mean, I think that's really key. Like, it might be okay at your house when you're driving 10 miles to work and back to just push it on that battery or wait a little longer on the brakes or something. But, I feel like that's really critical, just to be really aggressive about that, if at all possible. Make sure, because I've heard about people getting broke down in the UP, and you can literally get stranded. I mean, you can just be trapped, like literally, because they wait how long for a part or something. I knew people that actually broke down. They wound up buying a car because they couldn't get their problem solved fast enough. They were like, went and bought a car, to get out of there, or else they would be staying longer. So yeah, those are all good things to do.
Yeah, I mean, that's monumental with making sure your car can handle where you're going, especially if you're getting off the paved roads and maybe you're getting off the beaten path and you want to take a fire service road or, an ORV road that is open to vehicles. Like, some of that stuff gets real sketchy real fast. And one thing I've learned over years of just going to countless places is, one, it's generally best to not go alone if you're going to be doing serious off-roading. You want another vehicle there. You need to have recovery equipment in the vehicle. If you can, bring a winch. If not, then at the very least, like one of those come along ratcheting cables, um, nylon recovery straps, recovery boards, all that stuff. Cause, some of those puddles on those trails, it looks like, oh, yeah, this is probably, 3-4 inches deep. They can be a foot or more deep. And, you drive into that, you could be in some trouble if you're not prepared or you don't have the right stuff to get out of there.
Oh yeah, yeah. They have to be very careful in the UP. There's some roads they were just meant for like logging trucks, not passenger cars.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw
Yeah.
a post, I think it was like 3 or 4 years ago, where somebody took like a crossover SUV down a logging road up by Copper Harbor, and it got stuck way, way in the backwoods. And somehow they managed to reach help. And there was a individual that came out with a big lifted truck and a winch and the recovery boards and the straps and everything, and they got him out. But you know it's just not worth taking the risk. And I think one of the big things that, part of that planning and preparation piece is just keeping a level head. Don't panic in situations where things might go a little wonky, because if you're panicking, it's just going to make things so much worse. And you have to be able to think step by step, moment by moment, of what is the next thing I have to do to overcome whatever might have happened. Maybe, maybe you did get stuck. Maybe your trekking pole broke, your stove doesn't light, your water filter isn't working. Whatever the case might be, just keep a level head and one step at a time.
Exactly. Yeah. I can't say I told you the apple tantrum story. So I haven't always been level headed, but I think in general, if something really bad happens, I tend to be very calm because I assume when I'm by myself like that, even if I've been in touch with people, and such, no one's with me. So I assume there's no rescue. I assume no one's coming, and I have to act accordingly. Like, it isn't like, when you're at home and you say, "Oh, I can't open this jar," and you hand it off. It's like there's no one to hand it off to. You have to handle the situation. And if you're alone and, like me, I choose places because I don't want to shoot with a crowd. So I choose places where there probably isn't going to be anybody come along. And that's the danger with that is, so if something goes wrong, pretty important to be able to handle it. Or I always carry a rescue beacon, a satellite rescue beacon, the inReach. I think you do too. But I also know that you can't over depend on that either, because I've read about how just because you have that beacon does not mean help is going to come in 5 minutes. You might send out a signal and it would be received, but it might take 4 hours for them to get to you. So I don't over rely on that. I don't assume I can just do anything. So I think, although traveling alone gives me more latitude, I don't have to do what other people want to do. I can do what I want to do. I don't have to compromise. But I also feel like I have the responsibility to be more safe when I'm alone than if I'm with other people. I think with a group, sometimes people do take chances and the consequences aren't as bad because you got somebody to sit with you while you're bleeding or something, somebody else to go for help. So I think people tend to be maybe a little more comfortable taking risks if they know what they're with a group, if they know they're in cell range. But if you're not in cell range and you're not with a group, I'll just tell myself, it's like, put your safety head on. Don't put your photo head on. You're not just here for the shot. The goal is we leave here later this evening. We're not spending the night. We're not going to swim in that lake. We're here for photos, but that's not all there is to it. I think it's important. It is immersive, but it's also, I don't feel like solo photography in particular is not the kind of thing where I can just spend all my time looking at the LCD. If I'm shooting with friends, I'm not looking over my shoulder that much. But if I'm shooting with just by myself, I don't just stare at the LCD. I'm like, what's going on behind me? What's going on around me? Where's my bag? I don't just dump it and wander off. I do that with my friends, and then they're like, whose bag is this? But when I'm by myself, it's like, all right, you've got food in that bag. An animal could come up to it. Where's your bag? So I think there's a certain amount of responsibility, that you have to be more sensible when you're by yourself. You just have to.
Yeah, and I really like how you worded that, how you are personally responsible for you, and you have to appreciate that when you're out there, like you said, nobody's coming. You have to be self-reliant. And yeah, I carry one of those rescue beacons as well. And, I like that you can text from it. So, you can connect it to your phone and send text messages via satellite, which is great. I can check in with my wife and let her know, hey, this is what's going on. In the event of an emergency, maybe instead of hitting the SOS button, I can just send a text to my wife, hey, this is where I am. This is what's going on. I'm going to try to get myself out, but if I can't, I'm going to need help. And that is what I think the intended use case is for a lot of those SOS devices. When you sign up for the service, it says in there, like, you have to have attempted all self-rescue, whatever's possible, you have to attempt it. Because I've heard stories of people out west or wherever where they'll hike in and they're like, well, I'm tired. I don't want to hike back. And they'll hit the SOS and you can get charged. I think it's a couple $100,000 if it turns out that you're just basically hitting it because, well, I'm tired or I don't feel like doing this anymore. Those rescue operations aren't cheap.
Right. And we've all been places. I know I have Sirius radio on my minivan, and I've been in places where the radio goes out. I'm like, okay, so if I was here with my rescue beacon, there's no satellite connection here. There are places like that. Like if you're by a cliff or something, There isn't anything. I mean, I have the satellite possibility on my iPhone, and there'll be places where like no signal, no signal. It's like duly noted. You break your neck here, you can push the SOS button and nobody's coming because it's just going to bounce off that canyon. So yeah, and I think you mentioned something too about the being tired thing as an example, but I have learned that I cannot push myself to the point where I'm out of reserves. So I feel like if I'm driving or if I'm hiking, I might be like, oh, hey, I really want to get that shot another half mile. And I'll just like take inventory, go, you're done. You got to get back. You're tired. What if something happens? What if you have to rise to an emergency? You got nothing. And so I've made a commitment about that. That's kind of recent. Like, don't go till you're done. Go, just like if you're on a bike ride, you have to turn around, then you're going against the wind, right? Like you can't ride your bike with the wind behind you till you're exhausted and then turn around and go into the wind. It's not going to work out. So I've learned that with the Northern Lights too. I used to just always stay up all night, never go home before the aurora. Now I'm like, wait, falling asleep at the wheel is super easy and very irresponsible. It's a crime. It's like a crime. It's like drunk driving. It's irresponsible and it makes you a menace to the public. So it's like there was a time, I remember one time I was shooting and I came out of a location and then I checked data and the data was blowing up and I'm like, no, you're going back to camp. You got an hour's drive back to camp. If you go back to shoot at the location, that's 2 hours back to camp. And you're like out of power right now. And I remember telling that story at a workshop and I was like, the hemispheric power is like 180. I'm like, I just went back. You did that? You did? I'm like, yeah. Because what if I ran into some family and like killed them because what? I wanted a shot, So I feel like I have to have reserves. Like, sure, we push ourselves, and we all know what that is, what our capacity is. We all have a pretty good idea. And it's different for each person.
Yeah. Being self-aware and knowing your limits and understanding, like wherever you end up, you've got to get yourself back out. That's just baseline. You can't hike 3 miles in and overexert yourself and then be so tired that you can't turn around and get back. And I mean, even if there's an injury or whatnot involved, you still have to be able to figure it out. I mean, this past July, when I went to Baraga, I had hiked in to, I was going back to Baraga Falls, and it was about an hour until sunset. I got to the waterfall. I was all hyped up, ready to go, all pumped, taking a bunch of pictures. All of a sudden, I realized, wow, it's really, really dark. I need to go back. And I ended up falling down. And long story short, I herniated my disc between L4, L5, and walking everything was just immensely painful. But you realize I've got to get out. Like there's no question about it. And the rest of that trip, I was basically living on ibuprofen and just trying to take it easy. But before every hike, because I did that the first day I was there, and I was supposed to be there for 5 days. So before every hike, I'm thinking to myself, well, I know I'm injured. And wherever I go, I have to be able to make it back. And that's critical. I mean, it really builds into, safety and risk management. We really covered, planning, preparing, and that safety and risk management piece that comes up a lot when you're traveling alone, big safety concerns, emergency preparedness. We touched on that some, defensive measures and awareness. We covered some of that, but, overcoming fear, hesitation, all that different stuff. What precautions are you taking when you're out there to stay safe and make sure that, you're going to make it back?
Well, again, I've learned from experience. I've had so many things happen. I mean, like if somebody would have said, what are the things that could possibly happen? I would make the list. and I could check off everything on the list that I would make, and I was actually thinking about that list. I mean, adverse weather, snowstorms, floods, um, dust storms, injury, illness. I mean, I've caught everything on a trip from COVID to food poisoning on a trip I've been sick with. I've broken my ankle twice. I've ripped my rotator cuff. I think twice now. All these things have happened, and so because of that, I've changed how I do things. I assume stuff can go wrong. And so like I actually have with me when I travel, I've got something to wrap around my ankle if I sprain it. I've got something to wrap around my wrist if I fall down on my, because you always land on your wrist, right? I've got home remedies if I get food poisoning or if I get a virus. And because it's all happened. I'm not saying it's going to, but it could. If I travel to the UP, I have a full-size snow shovel because I have ended up in the ditch. I'm from Illinois. They weren't surprised to see me in the ditch, right? Because they're like, oh, yeah, they don't know how to drive. They're real nice to us, though, thank God. And they get me out. But, I have AAA. I mean, I know these things can happen because they've happened. I have an extra tent if the wind rips it up. I got an extra tent. I carry I have 2 EcoFlow batteries because I was actually, my most memorable experience was the August 2nd, 2015 derecho in northern Michigan. I was in the middle of a federal disaster area and no power, no fuel, no ice, no fresh food. And so I came to understand you have to have your own power, um, you have to have all your batteries charged. You can't have your last pair of clean underwear on when you're walking around. Like you got to keep up with your laundry. You know what I mean? So anyway, I think a lot of it is I get comfort by being prepared. And people laugh about how much stuff is in my car. I know Craig Sturkin said I could open up a dispensary at the top of Lake of the Clouds because I'm handing out Band-Aids. I'm pulling out lens cloths, but I think, it's a comfort. I'm less scared if I'm like, all right, well, if something happens, I got this,
Right. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, they make for great stories, but yeah. And I think too, just, we've had these experiences and so we're less likely to do some of the dumb stuff, I mean, I'm not saying you've done dumb stuff, but I've done a lot of dumb stuff. So some of the stuff, like no sympathy, you fell in the river because you walked on the thin ice. And so here you are with the fish in your boots, it's like, so now I always have a complete change of clothes in the back of the van because I know what it's like to be coming out of the Autrain River in -3 degrees, soaking wet, going, I got to change my clothes, So, I mean, it makes for a funny story, but at the same time, it changes, I make sure I have an extra pair of gloves in my camera backpack because I know what it's like to drop your one and only pair of winter gloves in the creek, and then what, you just can't manage. And so I don't know if that's answering the question, but
No, it does. Yeah. I mean, and that's, monumental with having backup items and putting your mind at ease, knowing that you have whatever you might need for any situation you might face. That risk management piece is huge. I think that a lot of us, myself included, sometimes even now, I'll come up in a situation where I'm like, well, how do I fix this? I don't have XYZ, or maybe I don't have a tool that I need, or what have you. And just over the course of the last year and a half now, I've actually put together a little backup photo bag that has Allen wrenches, screwdrivers, a backup filter kit, a backup, all kinds of things, like little screws that might fall out of the tripod,
oh yeah, oh yeah, oh
yeah,
yeah.
just all these little things because, like you said, something happens, like, heaven forbid, you go to open your tripod and maybe you loosen that leg lock a little too much and the leg pops out, you lose one of the little compression fittings in there. Well, now what? Your tripod's done. And, if you don't have a backup plan, well, you know, you're kind of up the creek at that point.
Exactly. I think duplicates when it comes to gear, having duplicates, if you can afford to have that extra filter or that extra tripod or that extra camera or whatever it might be that that if you lost it, the trip's over, then, that helps a lot. Plus I also, and I think you're prepared to step into this role too, because you're somebody who's got things at the ready. But I also think sometimes, I got this extra stuff. Maybe I'll help somebody else. And that may be a Band-Aid. That may be an ice pack. And I have those ice packs, that you can squeeze. I have enough of those for the whole family, but, maybe somebody will need it. I mean, that's the other thing. We're out there and we run into people. And I think about that with my rescue beacon. I may need to activate it for somebody else. So it isn't only being prepared for me, but, thinking about, well, a lot of people are out there roaming around who may or may not be prepared. Maybe they haven't had enough bad things happen yet to be prepared,
They haven't gone down the path of lessons yet. And, it's how we all learn. But yeah, I mean, I've loaned out filter kits to people who have broken their filters and just, hey, you know what? Come find me at the end of your trip and give it back, whatever. And, just a few years ago, actually, there was in the Porcupine Mountains, the Big Carp River Trail, how you basically start up at the overlook and then you lead down into the valley there. There was some people way back there with no water. It was like 80 degrees. They were just completely winded. And, I had a few bottles of water on me. So I was like, hey, you know what? Here's a bottle of water. Like, go stand in the shade, cool off, drink a little bit of water. And, they're like, oh my goodness, we're going to ruin your trip because now you don't have water. I'm like, I'm good. I've got a water filtration bottle in my bag, so I can get more water when I get down to the Big Carp. You came out here in your flip-flops and a t-shirt. Like, that's not ideal for what you're trying to do. Proper footwear and being prepared. I promise it goes a long way.
Yeah. Well, and the other side of that too, as far as being prepared is and this may not be a popular mindset, but I came upon it pretty long time ago. The way I look at it, the camera can be replaced. The tripod can be replaced. I can't. So if the tripod's falling off the cliff, I'm not going with it. And I know that's not popular. I've had photographers say, oh, no, I'm not going to throw myself off the cliff because I'm going to be like, it's insured. I got another camera in the car. Will I be upset that happened? Sure. I'm not going off the cliff yet, And one time I was shooting the Northern Lights at Lake Superior up by Copper Harbor. And I don't know how I got myself on some icy thing. You know how it all is in the winter, all icy. And I'm on some rock because that's the best angle I thought of view. I don't know why. And it was real wet. Maybe something was melting. And my tripod went right off into the Lake Superior.
Oh, no.
And I'm like, bye. Because I'm like, I just told myself, leave it alone. Leave it alone. You are not falling off this cliff for this stupid Gitzo, but then I watched for a while and I saw that Lake Superior was calm. And I'm like, all right, looks like you can go around and down. Looks like you can safely get it and get back up. But I was like, it's gone. It's gone, And I mean, 10 years earlier, I'd been like, and who knows what would have happened in this desperate, desire to get back my Gitzo, which I now I don't even like it anymore. It's not even that good of a tripod. You know how at the time you're all excited about it and you're like, oh, it's the last one I'll ever buy. And how that goes. But yeah, so I feel that way too. Like I want to feel like I can let it go. I can just let it go. If that's what it takes for me to be okay. Like I build that into my head because I think sometimes the instinct is save like, no. That's what I'm trying to tell myself. So hopefully I make the right choice. I mean, you never know the last minute, but.
Yeah. Like I've always said to myself and to anyone that's shot with me, they hear me say it all the time. There is no photo worth dying for.
Yeah, I remember you said that. So I knew I was safe saying that to you. I mean, it's a little bit controversial saying that,
Yeah. But I mean, like you said, it's replaceable. And I do the same thing. I carry backup gear. I carry backup everything. And it's not always on me. It, might leave it at camp or at the hotel or whatever. But the fact that, you know, yeah, this could happen. Well, if it does, well, yeah, does it suck that I just lost everything off this cliff? Yeah, it certainly does. But I have a wife and children that I want to go home and see. I'm not chasing it over the cliff. I don't care how much it costs.
No. Yeah, I think it's a balance, especially when you're by yourself. There's a responsibility to keep that balance between your creative dreams and goals and just that idea. We got to get back. We got to get back to camp. We got to get back to the hotel. We got to get back to this car. Maybe we get the shot, maybe we don't. But I've come to understand too, like, I don't always get the shot anyway. You know what I mean? Sometimes I'm knocking myself out, and I don't know if that's true of everybody, but I'm knocking myself out. I'm like, I didn't really, it was. So I've already come to the decision, like, you were there. You saw that sunset. You felt that spray in your face. You saw those northern lights. That counts for something. There's people who have never seen stars like that. There's people who have never sat at the edge of a crashing inland sea. The fact that you didn't get the shot is regrettable, but you got to be there. So I tell myself that. It's like, all right, you're turning around. Hey, you got to be here, you know?
Exactly. It's the experience first, nature first, photo second. That's what I always tell myself is whether or not you come away with a shot doesn't matter. If you did, great. If you didn't, there'll be other opportunities. It's not the last sunrise of the world. I mean, if it is, then we've got bigger problems anyways. But,
Yeah.
like there'll be other sunrises, other sunsets, and especially like, to the point, or I guess to the discussion topic of the Northern Lights at the beginning of the episode, it's one of those things that when I first started chasing them, I'd miss them a lot of the time because it changes so frequently and you can't beat yourself up over it. You can't go home with your head down, just saying, screw this. I'm going to sell this camera. I'm giving it up. Like, that's just the way it goes sometimes.
Oh, yeah. Oh, there's nothing more iffy. I mean, when you took off on May 10th and I took off on May 10th, it might or might not have worked out. It might have played out before we even got there. I mean, it ended up being a historic event, a big deal. We were fortunate, in our various parts of the woods that we got to see it. But it might have been a total bust. And we tell ourselves that. We put the gas in the tank, whatever. This might work out and might not.
But the important thing is that you make it home and you make decisions with safety in mind. And, when I got to Maze Ledges, so for all the listeners out there, I have a few different things, medically going on, and I'm basically extremely sensitive to caffeine. So when I decided I was going to have this Red Bull, everything was fine as I'm driving. And as I started hiking at Maze Ledges, like I could feel like, I was like, man, my heart rate is like something else right now. Like, what is this? So I stop and I look at my Apple Watch and all I'm doing is walking down this fairly level trail and my heart rate was like 180 beats a minute. And I was like, I got to go back to the truck. I got to drink some water. I got to chill out here for a minute. This is nuts. And I actually didn't end up exploring that area very much because same thing. Did I want the shot? Of course. But is it worth me going back there and blacking out when nobody knows where I am in the dark?
Oh my gosh.
In the middle of nowhere? Not at all.
It was cold that night too.
Yeah.
It was a cold night. That could have been dangerous.
Yeah. It was cooling off really quick. And then there was some fog that rolled in and it was just, that situational awareness that comes along with, risk management and being safe out there. You have to be situationally aware. Like you mentioned, when you were shooting solo, you're not staring at the back of your LCD screen the whole time. You're looking around, making sure you're aware of what's around you. You want to make sure, hey, maybe some other people showed up. they might not be there to, for any malicious reasons, but you still want to be aware that they're there.
Exactly. I think that's part of being a photographer, though. We should be aware of the big picture anyway. If all we're doing is focusing on that little square, that's not good shooting. I don't think. I think we need to be aware of what's going on, how are clouds moving, what's happening. I think that's just part of being, I mean, we're supposed to be observers, right? We're not supposed to just like zero in on a pinpoint of awareness. That's not what observers do. So I think that's part of it. And one of the things I do a lot of night stuff, obviously. I like the night. I'm most alert. I love how simplified the scenes are. It takes away all that clutter. That really works for my brain. And it just fits me. But I've started to actually study eye shine. Like, what do those colors mean? When you look into the inky darkness and there's white eye shine, what is that? Well, that's a deer. If it's green, it's probably a coyote. If it's orange, it might be a bear. If it's yellow, what kind of cat is that? So I've started to study that. Well, what is eye shine? And then compare it, to where I was, and so that I'm not getting scared of a mouse. You can walk through the woods and you hear it sounds like elephants, and it's probably like mice in the leaves. But at the same time, if there is a problem, I know, okay, that's orange. Or, yeah, I'm not scared of coyotes. I'm not scared of deer, but I would want to be aware if cat eyes are looking at me. I want to know that. I want to know if it's likely to be a bear. So I feel like eye shine is one of the things I've started to study. And I also feel like I don't think there's a lot of axe murderers out there because it's so remote. And really, it'd be such a huge waste of time for an axe murderer to go out in the middle of nowhere hoping that some woman alone would show up. Their odds are really low. I would think it would be very frustrating for them. That's probably not the place to go. If I was an axe murderer, that wouldn't be my goal. But I do know that drunks are a concern. I have been places where there were drunks. And so that actually worries me, especially if you're around water and boats. So that's something I keep in mind. And campground, I feel like drunks are about like running into a mountain lion. They're a little unpredictable. So I don't know. That's just part of my situational awareness. I remember shooting at Paradise Point one time, and I really wanted a different point of view. And there was some guy down there acting real weird. I'm like, oh, I'm thinking to myself, I want that shot. It's only one guy, young guy, obviously drunk. And I'm like, I got my pepper spray. And then I said to myself, what? Are you talking hand-to-hand combat right now? Is that what you're entertaining? Like, I know. I'm like, you're not going down there. I mean, who cares if he's too drunk to stand up? You're not going to spray somebody with pepper spray to get your shot. Like, So I know one time I was at Paradise and I looked around and it was a bunch of men. And I said to myself, you're the only woman here and you're the only one sober. Number 3, why are you here again? Like that's, if you really pay attention, like you can be all affable, like, oh, everything's okay. But it's like, that's a little weird. How about we go, So I think that's part of it too. Not that to walk around frightened, but, take it all in.
Yeah. Yeah. Just, taking it all in and being one with nature. I think that's a really big piece of going out there solo is the rewards that come with just being out there, being present, being involved. When you get out there, yes, there's challenges and there's rewards. There might be, like we've talked about, some unexpected obstacles. You need that mental and physical resilience that we've been discussing, and, all these different aspects that come together that just allow you to have these memorable moments, some good, some bad, hopefully mostly good. But, when you're out there traveling solo and just getting into nature, has there ever been one moment that you went through that's been your most challenging experience?
I mean, I would say probably the most challenging was that, again, August 2nd, 2015 derecho in northern Michigan, where they had 100-mile-an-hour straight line winds. And that was very challenging. I felt like it actually also informed a lot of the things I've done since. But I was up at, I don't know if you know the story, but I was on pier stocking. And a storm came out of nowhere. And I was at Glen Lake Overlook. And the sky, and I was getting my gear out. So I was in the back of my van, and the sky went navy and then it went green. And, anybody in the Midwest knows green's bad. That's a bad color. So, and then all of a sudden, it was just like shrapnel everywhere. And so I was trapped in the back of my car, couldn't get even to the front seat. And there was trees falling in front of my car, behind my car, and flying overhead because they were being uprooted. And so I thought, I probably wasn't going to make it. Like, I thought a tree's going to land on me. And I later understood the reason it was okay is that I was in a cutout area, because Glen Lake Overlook is cut out. Like, the trees have been removed. So they are falling around me, but not on me because they, had been cut out. So it was okay. But it was difficult because I was by myself. And obviously it was a very bad storm. And then after it was over, what I remember, they said 1,000 trees fell in 20 minutes right there. We were at ground zero by Glen Arbor. And I remember the trees kept falling after the wind quit. And it took 3 hours for them to cut us out. And that when I got out, I said, well, I need to get back to my camp. And they're like, we don't even know where you can go. And I had friends in the area I could have stayed with, but I could not get to their house because there was power lines down and trees down. And that's when I really understood what solo travel is. It means you're solving your own problems. And so it was like a 20-minute drive that took an hour and a half, going around down power lines, going around down trees, getting back to my camp. And there was a lot of destruction there, RVs that were destroyed, tents that had been exploded and floating in Lake Leelanau. And my tent was okay. And, then we all dealt with, the whole federal disaster area thing. But that was, kind of a defining moment, because I had the choice to stay or I could just go back to Illinois. But I had a 1-month reservation. They weren't going to give refunds. And I was like in, so I feel like that's kind of the approach, is like, I feel like I'm in for the duration. I'm not going to take stupid risks, but I feel like that was probably the most challenging, but also kind of strengthening experience, because I don't know. I mean, it was just a matter of coping, staying calm, solving problems, being on your own, knowing that even though there are people that cared about me, but they couldn't help me, like, I had to solve it. And so I feel like that experience is probably partly why I'm still doing it, because it was kind of affirming in a way. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, you're put in the ultimate situation of, I need to figure this out. And I think it's something that draws us all to nature. All of us that like being outside, outdoors, hiking deep into the wilderness, we all kind of thrive on that adrenaline, if you will, of, I'm out here, I'm by myself, I have to be hyper vigilant, I have to be aware, and I have to get myself to the place I want to go and back again safely. And like we talked about, you want to get back home to the car, camp, wherever you want to be. And that situation where something entirely out of your control, storm blows in, just wreaks havoc. Well, it's not that you put yourself in that situation willingly, but getting yourself out of that situation, of course, yeah, it reaffirms that you have that ability and that you're prepared, you're ready, you can take on these challenges, maybe take on bigger challenges, hopefully not weather related, of course, but it totally makes sense. You're reassuring yourself of, hey, I can do this.
Yeah, I mean, it was a horrible thing. It affected a lot of people in a negative way. I don't, it's not a positive thing, but it kind of showed me that solo travel fits me, because I could have left, and there's nothing wrong with that if I'd just said, okay, you know what, I'm just not going to do this, but I stuck it out. And that just showed me that I really wanted to do this. Like, sometimes we don't know, how much do you really want this? and it's okay if you don't want it enough to deal with no showers and no flush toilets and stuff, and no way to get food and all that for a week. I mean, that's okay. I mean, that doesn't mean anything bad, but it just showed me that it was a good fit for me, you know. And that I think in that sense it's positive, But I mean, not everything that has cemented my interest in solo travel and solo photography is bad or upsetting. I mean, there's also, these as well, these moments. I've had times with the Northern Lights, especially, I just felt one with the night. I'm just out there, whatever the temperature, whatever the conditions, and I am just in it. It's so powerful and so spiritual to me that I feel so incredibly blessed. Even for that 10 minutes or whatever. And maybe I'm shooting during it, maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm even just setting my camera aside and just looking at the lights, watching them shimmer. Sometimes that when they shimmer, it's like, oh my gosh, how many people on earth have had the experience of being in a dark sky area and watching the sky all around them do this? I mean, this is amazing to be alive in this moment and to be present, So, and of course, if you're there with your family, that's really meaningful too. There's, not that that's less. It's just that there's something immersive, I think, when you're by yourself. It's just immersive. Because, I mean, obviously, if people are there, you're interacting with them. So that's a different dimension, not less or more, just different. So I feel like it's just, I feel like someday when I'm not doing any of this stuff anymore, when I'm 110 or whatever, I'll just look back and think, wow, remember that? Like, I still do that. I don't know if you do that. Like if I'm I don't know, I got to have a procedure or something. They're about to put the anesthesia on my face. I'm like, well, let me just think about what it was like in paradise, or, getting your tooth drilled out, and you're just remembering something like that. And it's just it just changes everything,
Yeah, it's a life well lived. And those experiences, those stories, all of it, it all culminates to really who you become and how you see the world and how you interact with the world around you, both the people and the experiences. And I think that experiencing it from both the outdoors side and the photography side is just monumental. It's incredible because you develop that deeper connection with nature. You develop personal growth, self reliance, like we've talked about. You have those creative breakthroughs and you learn to do things maybe at a slower pace. You learn the importance and the luxury of uninterrupted time and the benefits of that heightened awareness where maybe the light's doing something really good over here. Well, like you talked about, you're not just locked in, you're looking around, you're taking it in. And if the light changes and something great presents itself, well, hey, I can point my camera this way and I'm going to get that shot or what have you. When you're out there and, you're experiencing all these different things and, capturing the essence of a place alone, how do you feel that solo travel impacts your creative process compared to traveling with others? I know you kind of went over that as one's not necessarily better or worse than the other, but we've both kind of hinted at, we feel more creative when we're by ourselves. How do you approach that when you're out there?
Well, I think there's a deeper level of concentration, at least for me, when it's more of a singular pursuit. And I also, I hope this isn't a tangent, but I also feel that, and maybe you have experienced this as well, that when I'm tent camping, like that's part of it. Like you do this too. I want to camp as close to my locations as possible, whether that's on the lake shore or in the woods or next to the inland lake or whatever. So I'm taking in the weather. I'm paying attention, even as I'm eating breakfast, like what's going on in the West, and that all is part of the photography. it may not be that at that minute I stop eating breakfast and I pick up my camera, but I'm aware. It's like, oh, what's happening to the lake right now? What time of day does it calm down? You start to see these things. It's almost like people that do wildlife, right? They watch the behavior of the birds so they know when to shoot at it. And I think that just if I pitch a tent, my style of travel is I like to stick around. Like I'm not a box checker. I meet box checkers when I'm traveling to national parks. Like, oh, we're going to all the parks. We're going to get all, I don't know, how about 54 or something. We got 2 days here and then we're going to White Sands. And I'm like, man, I can't even imagine. Like, I want to just settle in here. I want to be here a week or two or better if I can pull it off, if they'll let me, and just really experience the place. And I think that that's pretty tough to do if you're with other people. Because I think the average person on a vacation is like, well, we want to have these activities. We'll do this trail in the morning, that trail in the afternoon. Well, maybe in the morning, I'm studying maps, or maybe in the morning I'm downloading photos. Maybe I don't want to check anything off on the boxes. Maybe I just want to get that shot at 6 p.m. I want to be on the top of that hill. So I think solo travel just kind of makes that kind of thing possible. And some people could just get shots, whatever. But I feel like that feeling of having that sense of the power of place and just really feeling immersed and having the flexibility. I'm not making campfires. I'm not cooking chili over the stove. I'm just, power bar and I'm shooting. You know what I mean? Something stirring up some cereal in my jet boil. That's all. Like, it's not like, it's a totally different thing than like being on vacation, where you're trying to entertain kids or whatever, it's more singular, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm the same exact way. I'm not a box checker. I'm gonna go to one place and focus on it. Just be there. And like you said, maybe that morning you don't feel like getting up and going to shoot sunrise. You can just hang out and you're not going to disappoint anybody, or, you're not going to be stuck at camp by yourself because the rest of the group decided, well, I want to go do this. When you're by yourself, you don't have time constraints. You don't have anything like that. It's just, hey, what do I feel like doing? What am I led to do? And you can really, I feel, lean into that. What do I find inspiring and what do I feel led to pursue today or in this landscape? Or maybe, it's waterfalls one day and the next day you're like, well, today I want to do shoreline. I don't feel like shooting waterfalls right now. You don't have that conflict of interests of, well, somebody wants to shoot waterfalls, somebody wants to shoot overlook, somebody wants to shoot shoreline. Just, hey, what do I want to shoot? I'm going there.
Yeah, and it's about pace too. And my pace is different. I think it's like they say, you run your own race, right? I mean, if you see a marathon, you see people all spread out down the road, right? They're not all at the same pace. And if I'm shooting with a group of people, I mean, of course, I'm not going to want to make people wait for me everywhere we go, But if I was at my own pace, that's exactly what would happen, because I'm poking around. It takes me longer to figure out my compositions or whatever. That's just, I don't walk as fast, whatever. So I think I have to honor that's my pace. That's how far I can go. That's how much I can carry. That's how many places I want to go, and it's okay. It's okay if somebody's got an idea. I'm going to 15 waterfalls today. And maybe my idea is I might not go to that many in a whole trip, you know? So, and it's all right either way. It's just that, well, you have to be really matched with someone if you're really going to hang out for days and days and days, because otherwise somebody's compromising. And that's okay. Compromise is okay, but may or may not be the most productive thing for me, to be like, all right, I'll trot along for 15 waterfalls and come back with 3 shots because I just couldn't figure it out fast enough or whatever. Might be better for me to go to 2 and feel really good about whatever I accomplished. So I think it's pacing. I think it's immersion. And of course, just the power of place, just experiencing it, because that's all your experience is the power of place. There's nobody there talking. There's, just hearing all the dimensions of it that you hear it again when you look at your photos. You know what I mean? Like I'll look at my shots and and there may not be a cardinal in that shot, but I remember the cardinal that was singing at my elbow or, it all comes back later.
Yeah, like you said, it's that immersion of you're there, you're taking it all in, you're experiencing it with all of your senses, you're seeing it, you're feeling it, you're hearing it, you're smelling it. It's it's magical. What is some advice that you would offer photographers who want to build confidence in their solo photography work and their solo adventures?
Well, I think it's good to start out small. And I think it's good to let your heart lead you. I wouldn't make it like some like assignment for class type thing. If you're like, man, I've always wanted to see this particular lighthouse. I've just always, if you have something in your heart that you really want, that will get you out there. So I think listening to your heart and it is good to start small. It really is. I mean, I certainly did. Maybe do some solo shooting in the area you live in, try that, some solo hikes. If you haven't done that, and if you take a trip, obviously, in my opinion, I would not recommend if somebody's taking their first solo camping trip or something, I wouldn't go somewhere primitive. I wouldn't go somewhere where there's no cell coverage. I would start out somewhere a little softer, someplace you can plug in an electric cord, if you need to charge things. Like I would say ease into and maybe not when the weather's really bad or real extreme, maybe try to time it in a way that's not as harsh. I mean, sometimes people throw themselves in at the deep end and it's okay. But generally, if you have a successful experience the first time, you'll do it again. And if the first time's really bad, I've heard people talk about that with tent camping. I went once, it was horrible. The tent fell on my head and we drowned. It's like never doing it again. So I think in a way it's better to let's make this as successful as possible, and then maybe later, if you wind up in a situation that's really hard, you can roll with it. But I would say try to make it be an easier start, and maybe not a real long trip or maybe just stay in a hotel or Airbnb or something at first, just so it's not all new, Yeah.
Yeah, that's excellent advice. And I would recommend the same, start small and work your way up to the bigger things and, really allow yourself to, like we've said, have those experiences, have those wins and those failures, because it's going to teach you more as you progress, and it's going to allow you to learn what you absolutely must have and what's nice to have. Especially, one thing that has been a point of discussion throughout this episode is northern lights, shooting the night sky. One thing that I found made me feel a lot better and more confident and just more prepared was going to the places that I wanted to shoot at night in the daytime.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, just
Absolutely.
familiarizing yourself with it. So maybe there's a big route, maybe there's a drop off, whatever the case might be. It's a lot easier to see that in the day than it is when you're stumbling around at 2 a.m. with a flashlight.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, scouting. I don't know about you, but everywhere I go, I'm looking for a north view. I am. I'm like, is that a comp? Is that a north view comp? Would that work? Because, if you see that the data is really good and you're like, that's not a really good time to figure it all out. Like, it's better to have some ideas in advance. I mean, obviously we have to. And the first times I did it, I just went stumbling around in the dark, but it's probably not the most efficient way to do it.
I think that's how we all start. We get out there and we're just so excited because you're like, oh, look at the beautiful stars in the sky. And, oh, I got to get this shot. Or you see the northern lights. And I mean, it's happened to me where I've been so fixated on, wow, look how beautiful the lights are. I'll be walking and all of a sudden I'm like, why are my boots wet? And I look down, I'm like, I am standing in the lake. Like, what? When did this happen? And, it's like just one of those things, you get fixated on something and
Right.
all of a sudden now you've got new challenges. Well, now I'm all wet. Well, now what?
Well, I would say too, when it comes to solo shooting or solo travel, that if I could talk to my younger self, the one who started out doing this stuff 30 years ago, I would just say, be patient with yourself because it's going to change. The mistakes you're making now, you're not going to make later. You're not going out in a rainstorm in blue jeans again. That'll only happen once. You're not always going to be this scared. You're not always going to be this frustrated. Like that first trip or two was pretty ragged, pretty awkward. Not much came of it other than stories, but it changes, if it's the right thing to be doing, it changes. It gets better, it gets easier, it gets more fun, if it's the right thing. And of course people know, they'll know if they're, just not comfortable with it. It's not for everybody, but I think most artists do have to have time alone somehow, somewhere, really, to get into their craft, whether you're sculpting or whatever, I think that's writing, whatever. I think that private time's pretty productive for most people. So
Yeah. And I like what you were saying there is, you find your comfort level and you explore it. You don't have to be doing giant solo backpacking mountaineering trips up the side of, of a 14er out west, or, committing to this huge trip that, hey, I'm bringing meals and a water purifier and a backpacking tent, and I'm going to go stay out in the woods for a week by myself. You don't have to do that, especially if it's something that you don't feel comfortable doing. And that's okay. Everybody should find their comfort level and explore it. And that's totally reasonable. Some people might find that in backpacking into the middle of nowhere, while others may feel safe at a campground. Others might just feel safe at a hotel. Whatever the case is, as long as you're exploring it and you're out there, you're trying and you're experiencing the world in your solo pursuits of your arts and your photography and just your experiences, I think you're doing it right.
yeah, everybody's going to have their own style. Unfortunately, I mean, social media is very informative. If I'm going to take a trip across country, I like following different pages, for that national park or whatever. But I think that at this point in my life, I don't necessarily get myself confused about the right way or wrong way. And I don't apologize. It's like I do it my way. It works for me. I mean, years ago, I might be like, oh, I know I brought too much stuff. No, I didn't. I brought enough for me and everybody I meet. And eventually, the people making fun or laughing or kidding around are like, hey, do you have a band-aid? Did you bring an extra lens cap? They start to know that's who to ask. So it becomes just good natured, So it's like we have our own style. And, I think that's part of any art, the pursuit of it as well as the outcome is it's going to have our signature on it, our personal style of how we shoot, how we travel, how we get those images. One way to find out is to do it by yourself, Another way to find out is to go with other people and see how they do it. But ultimately, it just has to fit you.
And there's nothing wrong with either approach. And that's something that I feel, it took me a while to really get a grasp of was it's okay to go out solo, but it's okay to go with people. And like you said earlier, there's one is not just simply worse or better than the other. It's just different experiences, and that's okay.
And I think, comparison is always the killer, to joy. It's the killer to creativity. And if a person can master the art of spending time with other artists, and not getting caught up in some kind of negative comparison trap. There's going to be a lot of inspiration. There's going to be a lot of camaraderie. Everybody's going to be uplifted, but it's kind of as cloying as sibling rivalry. It's like, don't fall into it. It's okay. That person got the shot. You didn't, whatever, you're standing right next to them. Hey, it's just how it goes. Next time around, maybe you'll have a different opportunity and, it'll shake out differently. But staying away from that comparison, I think, is something artists, it's best if you can do it. It's really best. And it's natural to be like, oh, pushing yourself to do better. There's not really a right or wrong. And there's not really anybody that's got it all figured out. We've all got part of it figured out. Nobody's really got all of it figured out. Everybody's got different growing edges. And so I think solo travel has really helped me to be true to myself. It's helped me pull away from, because there's been times I've shot with friends and I'm like, you're trying to take a Neil Weaver shot, or you're trying to, that's not your shot. That's his shot. Like, yes, you're inspired, but that's not, you don't do that. Like, you do something else. And there's similarities, but if I'm by myself, I can kind of shed some of that. I mean, it's not bad to have inspiration, but to just really get in my own headspace and not think, oh, everybody else knows better or everybody else has got it right. Like, I don't want to be shooting with other people like you're copying off of somebody's paper in 7th grade. It's like, when you're by yourself, there's no chance of that. There's no chance going, well, they're over there. Should I be over there? I mean, not that you can't ask questions like, what are you doing for shutter speed? And that's helpful. Like, oh yeah, that works. I'm going to try that or whatever. But I don't know. It can get confusing sometimes depending on the person.
Yeah, it's that fear of missing out that kind of bubbles up when you're in a group. And I think, it happens to all of us. And shooting solo is great for just not having that feeling or any of those feelings of what if that's the better composition? What if that's the better angle? What if that light over there is better? It's up to you. And whatever you feel, whatever you think, however it speaks to you, you can experience that and produce your best work. At least in my experience, when you're just in that flow state by yourself, focused and experiencing everything as it's happening, for me personally, that's when I'm producing my best images. Now, before we close everything out here and wrap up the episode, if you had 3 quick tips to give someone preparing for their first solo trip, maybe something we already discussed or something that, like you said, if you could go back and talk to yourself when you first started, if there were 3 things that you could tell to yourself or to someone starting their own first trip, what would you tell them?
Well, I think as far as expectations go, I think we have hopes, we have dreams, we have aspirations. But I would say for first, second, last, whatever solo trip, to keep it in the hopes, dreams, aspirations category, not so much the expectations category. Because I think especially with landscape photography, well, we can't control the sunset. We can't control the clouds. Whether or not it's windy. I mean, so I think that kills a lot of that frustration if it's just like my hope is, my dream is, I'm inspired by the idea of, but not like I'm getting this shot. I'm getting, that I think that's a real trip killer, to say, okay, day 1, 10 a.m., this happens. So I think that idea of being inspired and aspiring and strategy and all that, but then just kind of relaxing those expectations and just, knowing that the capacity to be able to take a road trip on your own is such a luxury. Such a luxury, whether that's for a day or a weekend or a week, that is such a gift, just to look at it that way. And then I would say too, make reservations and take a map. I mean, especially if it's a UP, the number of people that show up, hey, you got anything, and they're like, no, like maybe try Wisconsin, So I would say those two things: paper map and make reservations. And then the other one is just, go with your heart, go with your hopes and dreams, and don't don't have it all set up in your head that it has to be a certain way, because it's really hard to tell. We all know that about landscape photography anyway.
Right. Yeah. I mean, all great points. And certainly I would agree to all of that, because that will make the experience and the photos that much better. And that's really what you're out there for to begin with. So I want to say thank you very much for jumping on the episode and joining us and having this discussion and just sharing your experiences and your expertise. It's been awesome. I've really enjoyed this. How can people find your work and your workshops and get involved with some of the stuff that you guys are doing?
Oh, okay. So the workshops I do with Neil Weaver Photography are at www.visionlandscapephotoworkshops.com. I also have a link to our workshops at michiganscenery.com. And I know Neil Weaver also on his website has a link to our workshops on his website. And I have my own Instagram account also at Aubrieta Hope, and my Facebook page is Michigan Scenery. So that's pretty much the ways you could contact me.
Excellent. And I'll make sure to include all those links in the show notes so that all of you can go and check out her work, check out her workshops. I've been right there while her and Neil are leading workshops, and I will say, beyond any question, they are excellent teachers. They're excellent instructors and just take you guys to some awesome places. So highly recommended. And thank you again. I certainly appreciate the discussion and your time to jump on here and chat with me today.
Thanks so much, Nick. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you again, Aubrieta. It was a pleasure sharing stories and discussing the many challenges and rewards of solo travel. I hope all of you found this episode helpful and inspiring, and I encourage you to get out there and plan a trip this spring as well. Don't forget to head over to her links in the show notes, give her a follow, and check out her workshops with Neil Weaver. They are two incredibly talented individuals, and both of them are wonderful people. Next week, we're going to be joined by Greg Benz as we discuss HDR photography, but not in the way that you might think of it. This is not a discussion on the old ways of HDR, rather, a discussion on the emerging technology and resources available to us that are going to help us take our photos to incredible, never-before-seen levels of dynamic range, detail, and intrigue. A Minnesota-based landscape photographer and developer of the incredibly powerful and well-known Lumenzia luminosity panel, this is a discussion that you will not want to miss. Please do not forget to rate and subscribe so that you can be notified when the episode becomes available. I will see you all on the next one. Take care, everybody.